Imagine a young Hebrew boy growing up in the middle of the desert among tents, dust, and promises. His name was Joshua, son of Nun, of the tribe of Ephraim. But his story does not begin with great battles or miracles. It begins with service and fidelity. Joshua was still very young when he began to walk alongside Moses, the great liberator of Israel. And contrary to what many may think, he did not reach the top by chance. He was not born on a throne, but was formed at the feet of the leader closest to God that Israel had ever had. The Bible tells us that Joshua was Moses' personal assistant. It was not just any position. He saw things that the people did not see. He participated in intimate, decisive moments, and most importantly, he watched as Moses spoke to God. He learned to listen, to wait, and to obey. In Exodus 33:11, there is a wonderful detail that cannot be ignored. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to his friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but Joshua, his young assistant, did not leave the tent. Can you imagine this? As everyone went back to their activities, Joshua stood there, in silence, in reverence, in the presence of the living God. Joshua was not looking for a stage or applause. He wanted to be where God was, and that shaped his heart. This young man, who was just a servant at that time, was being trained by God, not with swords, but with relationship and obedience. He did not yet have great titles, but he already demonstrated greatness of soul. He was not a leader yet, but he was already a leader of his own heart. And perhaps this is the greatest lesson from this first moment. God prepares leaders in secret, in service, and in his presence. Was Joshua ready? Not yet. But God was forming in him what was needed, a faithful, attentive, obedient, and steadfast heart. While the people murmured, Joshua listened. While the people were distracted, Joshua remained. While Moses prayed, Joshua learned. This is how Joshua's journey begins, with humility, silence, and fidelity. And it is precisely this foundation that would lead him to become the leader who would one day guide Israel to the conquest of the Promised Land. After years of walking with Moses, Joshua was now a mature man in faith, and the time of the promise was approaching. The people of Israel had left Egypt, crossed the desert, and were now camped near the land that God had promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the land of Canaan, where milk and honey flow. But there was a problem. The land was inhabited by powerful peoples, fortified cities, and giants. It took more than human courage to enter it. It took belief in the God who promised. It was then that Moses made a strategic decision. He separated 12 men, one from each tribe, to spy out the land. Among them was Joshua, representing the tribe of Ephraim, Numbers 13:8. Its original name was Hosea, but Moses called him Joshua, which means the Lord is salvation, Numbers 13:16, a prophetic name for the mission he would fulfill in the future. These 12 spies crossed the Jordan and passed through 40 days, observing everything: the cities, the walls, the people, the crops, the fields, and the soldiers. The land was indeed extraordinary, just as God had said. A fertile, beautiful, promising place. But when they returned, most of the spies, 10 of them, delivered a terrifying report. They said the inhabitants were giants, the walls were impenetrable, and that Israel had no chance. Fear spread through the camp like a brush fire. The people began to murmur, to complain, and even to wish they could return to Egypt. It was a critical moment. But then Joshua and Caleb stood up. They tore their clothes, a gesture of pain and indignation, and spoke boldly to the people. The land through which we passed to spy it out is an exceedingly good land. If the Lord delights in us, he will bring us into it and give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, for we will devour them as bread. The Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. Numbers 14:7-9. They saw the same walls that the others saw. They also saw the giants. But Joshua and Caleb saw something else, saw God above all this. It was a demonstration of unshakable faith, but unfortunately, the people did not listen to them. Because of the general unbelief, God decreed that that generation would not enter the promised land. All men over 20 years old would die in the desert, with two exceptions, Joshua and Caleb, Numbers 14:30. Do you realize what happened here? Joshua not only had courage, he had spiritual vision. He saw what others did not. While others looked at the obstacles, Joshua looked for the promise and to the God of promise. Therefore, God spared his life. Joshua survived the desert because his faith was stronger than his fear. The scene was heartbreaking. The people of Israel, who were already on the brink of the promised land, would now have to turn to the desert. Because of unbelief and rebellion against God, that generation that doubted would not see the promise fulfilled. God declared, "In this wilderness, your carcasses will fall." Numbers 14:29. 40 years. That was the time of waiting. A year for every day the spies spent observing the land. And there, in the scorching heat, amidst the sand and the famine, an entire generation died. The people's tents became fields of mourning. All those who disbelieved were, little by little, buried in the dust of the desert. But two men remained alive, two men who carried the flame of promise, Joshua and Caleb. During these years, Joshua not only survived, he grew up. He saw Moses' leadership challenged. He saw rebellions arise, such as that of Korah and his followers. He saw fiery serpents invade the camp because of the people's murmuring. He saw God provide manna from heaven and water from the rock. He saw God's hand guiding Israel, even when the people did not deserve it. That desert was God's school, and Joshua learned. He saw what happened when you trusted God and what happened when you disobeyed. Every morning in the desert was a reminder, we are here because we chose to listen to fear rather than to the voice of God. But Joshua did not murmur, he did not question, I was waiting. As people grew old and died, Joshua stood firm, his eyes fixed on the promise. It is important to remember that during this time, Moses continued to lead and Joshua continued to serve. We never see Joshua trying to take Moses' place. On the contrary, he was always ready to obey, ready to support, ready to learn. It was as if Joshua knew that God's timing is perfect and that every moment of silence, of waiting, of trial was part of a greater plan. And here's an important point for anyone watching. Sometimes God does not respond quickly, but that doesn't mean he forgot the promise. He is shaping the heart of the one who will carry it. That's what happened to Joshua. 40 years later, a new generation stood up. Young people who had not been born in Egypt, sons and daughters of those who had died in the wilderness, a people who needed leadership, direction, and faith. And Joshua was ready. The desert that destroyed many was the same one that built Joshua. After 40 years of desert, of waiting and learning, the moment was approaching. Israel was finally on the doorstep of the promised land. But there was some bad news for everyone. Moses would not go in with them. Even though Moses was the greatest prophet in Israel's history up to that point, he had disobeyed God by striking the rock at Meribah when he was supposed to be speaking to it. Because of this, the Lord said that he would see the land but not possess it. Numbers 20:12. This came as a shock to the people. Moses was their leader who had guided them for decades. Who could take his place? It was then that God spoke to Moses directly. Take for yourself Joshua, the son of Nun, a man in whom is the Spirit, and lay your hand on him. Numbers 27:18. Joshua was already known to the people. He had been a spy, a warrior, and a faithful servant of Moses. But now God was calling publicly to be the new leader. It was a time of transition. Imagine the scene. Moses, the deliverer from Egypt, the man who spoke to God on Mount Sinai, now standing before the entire congregation, lays hands on Joshua, passing the authority to him. In that symbolic and solemn act, something spiritual happens. The leadership, the anointing, the responsibility, all of that begins to be transferred. The Bible says, Joshua the son of Nun was filled with the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands on him, and the children of Israel listened to him. Deuteronomy 34:9. But don't think that Joshua was completely at ease. Taking Moses' place was not an easy task. It was like replacing someone irreplaceable. So when Moses left, God himself speaks to Joshua to encourage you. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land which I swore to their fathers to give them. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:6-9. These words were not spoken just once. God repeated them over and over again because he knew Joshua was carrying a huge burden: lead an entire people into the promise, face enemy nations, lead wars, and remain faithful to God. But Joshua was no longer alone as before. Now he was dressed of authority, anointed for the mission. From a servant he became general. From helper he became a ruler. The time for waiting was over. Now it was time to lead. And more than that, it was time to trust everything he had learned in the desert. Joshua was ready, the people were ready, and God's promise was about to be fulfilled. Now Joshua was officially in charge. The people knew it, he knew it, and heaven knew it too. But before taking any step, before planning war strategies or crossing the Jordan River, Joshua had a powerful encounter with God himself, a defining moment that sealed his mission with heavenly authority. Right at the beginning of the book of Joshua, we see the Lord speaking directly to him in a clear, firm tone full of promises. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. Joshua 1:5. This phrase echoed like thunder in Joshua's heart. God was saying, have you seen what I did to Moses? Well, I will be with you the same way. Next, God gives Joshua 3 direct orders, which would become the motto of his life. Say forte, be brave, fear not. These words were not empty words. They were fuel for the mission to come. Joshua would have to lead a people with a difficult history, face giant enemies, tear down walls, and still keep everyone obedient to the law of the Lord. Therefore, God makes the secret of success clear. This book of the law shall not depart from your mouth, but you shall meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do according to all that is written in it. Then you will make your way prosperous and have success. Joshua 1:8. God did not just give Joshua military power, gave him the word. Joshua's success would not lie in the sword, but in obedience. Here's how interesting this is. God didn't give Joshua a map of the promised land, nor detailed war strategies. Instead, he gave him a spiritual order: meditate on the law. In other words, to conquer the outside, Joshua would need to be strong inside. And Joshua understood this. From that moment on, he became a man of action with a submissive soul. He knew that his strength came from the Lord. The people noticed it too. In Joshua 1:16-17, all the leaders respond to him by saying, all that you commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us, we will go. Just as we listened to Moses, so we will listen to you. Only the Lord your God will be with you as he was with Moses. Joshua was in fact commissioned, not only by Moses, but now by God himself. There was a new era before Israel, and Joshua was the man who had been prepared for decades for this moment. The time of the wilderness was over, the time of promise had come. But to possess it, it would be necessary to take the next step, cross the Jordan. Now, with leadership firmly established, Joshua faced his first great challenge as commander of God's people: cross the Jordan River to enter the promised land. Just imagine the scene. The people camped on the banks of the Jordan. In front of them, the waters flow vigorously, full of currents, and the river seems like a natural wall impossible to cross. On the other side, the promised land, fertile, beautiful, full of cities to conquer. It was the decisive moment. But Joshua remembers the words God spoke to him: I will be with you, do not fear. So he gathers the people and orders something surprising. The priests should take the Ark of the Covenant. the symbol of God's presence, and advanced to the river, Joshua 3:3. The ark was sacred. Inside it were the tablets of the law, the 10 commandments which Moses had received on Sinai. It represented God himself walking with the people. When the priests, carrying the ark, stepped into the waters of the Jordan, something incredible happened. The waters of the river stopped flowing. Joshua 3:15-16. It was an unprecedented miracle. The waters parted like a wall, forming a dry path for the people to pass. Through on dry land. Joy and faith exploded in the hearts of the Israelites. They were seeing with their own eyes God's care, the fulfillment of the promise, and the certainty that they were not alone. Joshua, with calm and leadership, guided each step of the people through the new stage. On the other side of the river, they raised 12 stones, one for each tribe, to remember that day and that miracle forever. Joshua 4:20-24. It was an eternal sign. Just as God helped us cross the Jordan, He will help us conquer this land. This crossing symbolized the end of the desert and the beginning of a new life, full of challenges, but with the guarantee of God's presence. Joshua had led Israel to what seemed impossible, and God showed that victory would come hand in hand with faith. Imagine the city of Jericho, surrounded by high, imposing walls that seemed to touch the sky, a fortress impossible for ordinary men to take. It was the first city Israel would have to conquer in the Promised Land, and the pressure on Joshua was enormous. He knew he could not rely on human strength. Only God's intervention could open the way. God then gave clear and surprising instructions to Joshua and the people. You are to march around the city once a day for 6 days, with the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant and the soldiers blowing trumpets. On the 7th day, you are to march around the city 7 times, and at the sound of the trumpets, the people are to shout. Joshua 6:3-5. Joshua might have thought, what do you mean? We're not going to attack with swords, we're just going to march and shout. But Joshua trusted fully. He knew that the miracle at the Jordan was a sign. God was in control, and victory would come from the Lord. For 6 days, the people did exactly what God commanded. The army marched silently, the priests blew their trumpets, and tension grew within Jericho. On the 7th day, the climax. The people marched around the city 7 times. In the 7th circle, to the thunderous sound of the trumpets, Joshua ordered the shout. And then something unbelievable happened. The walls of Jericho collapsed. Joshua 6:20. It was the power of God manifested before the eyes of all Israel. The people advanced and took the city with ease. But Joshua left a clear command. Nothing in that city was to be taken for oneself. Everything was consecrated to the Lord. Joshua 6:17. This victory showed that the conquest of the Promised Land would not be by human strength, but by faithfulness and obedience to the Lord. Joshua was learning and teaching the people that the real battle is spiritual. And when the people walk in faith and obedience, God opens the impossible paths. After the impressive victory at Jericho, Joshua and the people of Israel felt the fulfillment of their promise. But the journey was far from over. They faced other fortified cities, each with its own challenges: Ai, Gibeon, Hebron, and many others. Not all battles were easy. There were victories and defeats, moments of doubt and learning. A striking example was the initial defeat at Ai, Joshua 7. The people sinned, disobeying God by taking for themselves plunder that should have been consecrated. This provoked God's wrath, and Israel was defeated. This episode was a warning to Joshua and to all. Obedience to God is fundamental to success. But Joshua did not give up. He prayed, sought God's guidance, and led the people to correct their mistakes. When faith returned, victories returned as well. Joshua proved himself a wise leader, not only through strength, but through the humility of recognizing God's sovereignty. Furthermore, Joshua faced unexpected alliances. For example, the inhabitants of Gibeon made a peace treaty with Israel, Joshua 9, using cunning to avoid destruction. Joshua and the leaders, without consulting God, accepted the covenant. When they realized the deception, they honored the agreement, demonstrating integrity and commitment to their word. Every battle, every decision was a lesson in trusting God in leadership, justice, and faithfulness. Joshua's walk was a constant balance between action and faith, between strength and submission. He was not a hero alone. He was a man guided by God, a faithful servant of the word. After the conquest of the cities and the establishment of dominion over the promised land, the time came to fulfill an even greater promise. Divide the land among the 12 tribes of Israel. Imagine the amount of responsibility Joshua carried. Each tribe had its own expectations, stories, and dreams. It was a complex mission, full of details, difficult decisions, and justice. God ordered Joshua to distribute the land by lot, to ensure that each tribe received its portion according to God's plan. Joshua 18:10. To do this, Joshua consulted the leaders, the chiefs of the tribes, and together they defined the borders. This division was not just territorial, it was the fulfillment of the promise made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that their descendants would inherit the land. Each piece given represented an inheritance, a place to live, plant crops, raise children, and worship God. Joshua worked with zeal and justice, ensuring that each tribe was considered, including the Levites, who received specific cities to live in, as they had no land of their own. Joshua 21. But this sharing also symbolized something bigger, the end of the pilgrimage and the beginning of a new era. The earth was not just ground, it was home, a resting place, the scene of fulfilled promises. Joshua knew that this step required wisdom and integrity, as any injustice could generate conflict in the future. The people, in turn, saw in Joshua a leader who had fulfilled the word of God, who had guided them with courage and faith. They experienced a moment of peace and hope. And in this scenario, Joshua also reminded the people of the importance of remain faithful to God, since possession of that land depended on continued obedience. After so many years of struggles, victories, and challenges, Joshua gathers the people of Israel one last time before his death. He knows that it is not enough to simply conquer the land. The real challenge is remain faithful to God. In an emotional speech, Joshua recalls everything God has done for the people, from the liberation from Egypt through the desert to the battles in the Promised Land. But he also knows that fidelity can waver. So he challenges each one. Choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served beyond the river or the gods of the Amorites, in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Joshua 24:15. It is a moment of decision, almost like an invitation. Will you follow the safe path, trusting in the God who performed miracles, or will you return to your old habits, to false gods, and to disobedience? The people respond affirmatively, promising to serve only the Lord, renewing the covenant made by their ancestors. Joshua leaves a clear legacy. The choice is personal and non-transferable. Each person must decide who they will give their life to. This speech marks the end of Joshua's leadership, but also the beginning of a new period for Israel, full of promises, but also of risks, because faithfulness to the Lord depends on each person's daily decision. After his final speech, Joshua leads the people to Mount Ebal, a symbolic place where they renew their covenant with God. There, Joshua orders the construction of a stone altar, simple yet meaningful, to remind them of the importance of obeying the law. The people read aloud all the blessings and curses that were written in the law of God, reaffirming their commitment to follow the path of the Lord. This renewal was not just a ritual, but a moment of spiritual reaffirmation, a call for Israel to live in faithfulness, knowing that their choices would have consequences. Joshua lived to see his people established in the land, fulfilling the promise God had made to their ancestors. He had a long life, about 110 years, full of battles, victories, and teachings. Before he died, Joshua made it clear that the secret to his success was trust in God and faithfulness to his word. His burial was in Timnath-Serah, in the hill country of Ephraim, a place he himself received as an inheritance. Joshua was a faithful, courageous leader who guided Israel through the transition from the desert to the land of abundance, always with the presence of God as his greatest guide. Joshua is a timeless example for all of us, especially for those who face challenges and need to lead with courage. His life teaches us that true strength comes from God, that obeying his word brings success and peace, and that every decision has an eternal impact. Joshua did not conquer the land alone. He was an instrument in the hands of God, showing that faith and action go hand in hand. After Joshua's death, Israel entered a period of uncertainty. Without such a strong leader, the people faced many challenges, especially in maintaining their faithfulness to God. But Joshua's leadership left a legacy that echoed through generations. The importance of trusting God in all circumstances, the need for courage in the face of obstacles, the centrality of obedience to the law as a path to prosperity. Joshua became a reference for future leaders, a model of faithfulness who inspired the people to always seek the will of the Lord. The story of Joshua is not just an ancient tale, it speaks directly to each of us today. She reminds us that life is made up of moments of decision, and choosing to follow God is a daily commitment. Challenges and changes require courage and faith, because God is with us in every battle. True victory lies in obedience and an intimate relationship with God. Like Joshua, we are called to be courageous, to trust in God's promises, and to lead our lives with wisdom and faith. Joshua's faith was the foundation of his entire life and leadership. From a young age, Joshua demonstrated a deep trust in God, who guided him at decisive moments for the people of Israel. When Moses died, Joshua was given the mission to lead Israel into the Promised Land, a huge task, full of challenges and battles. But instead of being intimidated, Joshua trusted fully in God's promise. Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. This word became his motto. Joshua knew that conquest did not depend on his strength or strategy, but on the faithfulness and power of God. Joshua's journey is one of the most inspiring chapters in the Bible, not only because of his military victories or possession of the Promised Land, but because his life reflects an unwavering commitment to God, supernatural courage in the face of the unknown, and a faithfulness that overcame all adversity. From the moment Joshua assumed leadership after the death of Moses, he knew he was faced with a mission that went beyond simply leading a people. It was the task of fulfilling the promises God had made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give their descendants a land where they could live in peace and prosperity. This mission required much more than strategic skills. It required total trust in God, daily communion with the Lord, and a courage that could only come from the divine Spirit. The crossing of the Jordan River, for example, was not just a physical event. It was a spiritual milestone. Imagine the scene. The river, known for its powerful current, miraculously parts so that the Israelites can cross on dry land. Each step was a testament to God's faithfulness, a reminder that Joshua did not walk alone, but was backed by the Almighty God who had delivered Israel from Egypt. This same faith guided Joshua in the legendary Battle of Jericho. The seemingly insurmountable walls fell not by human strength, but by the fulfillment of a divine strategy: to march in silence day after day until the Lord commanded the right moment. When the silence was broken by the shouts of the people and the sound of trumpets, the walls crumbled. This victory not only marked the conquest of a city, but symbolized that true strength lies in obedience and trust in God. Even when faced with setbacks, such as defeat in the battle against Ai, Joshua did not lose faith. He turned to God, seeking to understand the reason for his failure. It was a moment of introspection and correction, showing that a faithful leader also knows how to recognize his mistakes and the importance of repentance and justice within the community. In addition to his battles, Joshua also distinguished himself by his wise and just leadership in dividing the land among the tribes of Israel. Each parcel of land was granted equitably and according to God's plan, ensuring that the people had a place to grow, work, and worship God. This act of territorial justice symbolized God's faithfulness to his promises and the leader's responsibility to care for his people with integrity. The culmination of Joshua's life was perhaps his final address, in which he called upon all Israel to make a definitive choice. In a firm and emotional voice, he challenged the people to decide whom they would serve, the old gods or the Lord, the God who had delivered and led them. The people's response was a reaffirmation of their commitment to God, showing that faithfulness is a daily decision, a covenant that must be constantly renewed. Joshua's legacy is therefore much more than a story of physical conquests. It is an eternal invitation for each of us to choose, with courage and conviction, to follow the path of faith. He teaches us that true victory is only possible when we trust in the Lord above all things, when we seek His guidance in every step, and when we remain faithful even in the face of the greatest challenges. Joshua was not perfect, but he was a man after God's own heart, whose life and work continue to inspire millions today. He shows us that true leadership is about servanthood, that a warrior's strength comes from surrender to the Lord, and that the path to fulfillment lies through obedience and trust in God. May we, like Joshua, say with complete conviction, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:15. May this choice be the basis of our life, the light that illuminates our steps, and the source of our hope for better days. May the story of Joshua awaken in us a renewed faith, a courage that defies the impossible, and a fidelity that remains firm regardless of the storms. This is the legacy he left us, an invitation to be, in our time, faithful leaders, warriors of faith, and living witnesses to the transforming power of God. At the end of his life, Joshua called Israel to make a decisive choice, to serve the Lord or foreign gods. His faith was so firm that he declared, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." Joshua 24:15. Joshua is an example of active faith, one that translates into courage, obedience, and leadership inspired by trust in the Lord. His life teaches us that true faith does not eliminate challenges, but gives us the strength to face them with hope and determination. If Joshua's story touched your heart, inspiring faith, courage, and the confidence that God is with us in every battle, I invite you to leave your like below. Like this video, so that more people can get to know this powerful example of leadership and faithfulness, which teaches us to choose to serve the Lord every day, just as Joshua did. And don't forget, share in the comments what you learned from Joshua, or perhaps a faith experience that changed your life. Your story can inspire others. Thank you so much for being here with me on this journey. Until the next video, with more stories that transform, may God bless you and your family.